Hey there, welcome to episode 74 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on Friday, July 26, 2024. It's right around noon on another warm Friday here in Vegas. Today we are talking about Agile for all, Agile being originally a software development methodology to turn software development time into better products, better outcomes. But over the years, since it was conceived in 2001, it has taken on various shapes and forms. And we are making use of Agile in a modified way for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation to make it easier, maybe a word I hesitate to use always, for volunteers. We're an all-volunteer organization to collaborate on initiatives and projects so that we can make the most of volunteer time. In a nutshell, we'll go into this a bit more, but that's the crux of today's episode. Hopefully, wherever you have found this audio program, and wherever you do find your audio programs or podcasts, you're able to find a episode description. In the episode description for today, we have the show notes. It's called show notes with the summary, which I'll read to you shortly, and then a few links. Aside from the usual 2 self-promotion links, shameless self-promotion, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quick links that are relevant apropos to today's topic. So yeah, let's begin. The Agile Method was conceived in early 2001, I believe it was actually February, by professional software developers for software development. Since then, the Agile Industrial Complex has built businesses on the notions that and on these notions, and left a sour taste in the mouths of software developers everywhere on these notions. Let me correct that right now. All right. So, arguably thanks to what is Arguably thanks to what is now arguably. I should edit this. Arguably thanks to what is now Agile in name only. All that said, suppose Agile in its original form could be applied to, in that form, to something other than software development, which is what we'll talk about today. That was quite an adventure getting through that summary. So bottom line, Agile was conceived in one way and has been turned into something else under different names and different ways of making money on it and different ways of using it for the unintended purposes. And this has led to some bad feelings, some bad notions, some bad opinions that are based on bad experiences that are probably misguided or misled. Possibly. Raise your hand if you've ever been a part of an Agile, so-called Agile project, on an Agile project team, and you find yourself wondering, we're doing the stand-up meetings, and we're talking about story points, but we're not really, that's about where it ends. Usually it turns into yet another way for project managers to feel good about themselves. I'll tell a story about one of my workplaces, one of several, but when the measurements become the goal, and there's a law for that. But let's get started with the links for today's episode. The first 2, of course, the shameless self-promotion at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo and Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to spend any money. If you do, you will be buying me a coffee. All proceeds do go towards the coffee that powers all of my various projects and audio programs, content creation, production. There are links to my various productions on the Buy Me a Coffee site. I do like their sort of free form. It's kind of like a link tree or similar, but it's free form. You can edit this page of links and descriptive text and so on. The editing tools are not great, but it does what I need, and I don't have to manage an entire website. And if you've been listening to any of my programs over the last 2 months, maybe, you'll know that getting websites launched for the various audio programs on which I'm working is on the to-do list, but it has unfortunately moved down the to-do list based on the public-facing stuff that I have to work on first. So that's always fun. So I don't have to manage buymeacoffee.com. I don't have to deal with Ko-fi.com. They're there. I can use them. You can go there. You can click on some links. You can see what's happening, see what's up. You don't have to spend any money. If you want to, go ahead. Please do. And again, any proceeds through either of those sites does go towards purchasing coffee. And do note that I have a few of my favorite beans mentioned on the Buy Me a Coffee site on the page. The Agile Manifesto is located at agilemanifesto.org. Again, written or conceived or spelled out, put to, not pen to paper, but I think it was a whiteboard or a chalkboard, but spelled out February 2001 by a collection of 17 software development professionals to try to make their jobs better, not necessarily easier. The goals, as we'll see, I'll read through. The Agile Manifesto is frighteningly brief. It's something that someone could read, as we will find out, in the space of moments. It's not a book. It's not even a pamphlet. It's it's 12 principles, and I want to say like 5 lines that we'll start off with. Anyway, we'll get to that. The Agile Manifesto, it's worth taking a glance at, because then when you look at the Agile Industrial Complex that's been built up around it, it's sort of frightening. It's a lot, and maybe too much. And I think it has led to bad experiences, and I've certainly had them. And so when I hear people describe what you could read in the next link, is Agile this bad? There's a website called Engprax, Engprax. They have a post that came out in mid-June, so earlier, like a little over a month ago, this summer, suggesting that there's a 268% higher failure rate for Agile software projects. Study finds. They only talk to a collection and a small sampling, a small population sample of U.S. and United Kingdom, UK, software developers. And so small survey size, very small time window. It was over a couple of days in May, I think. I've done an episode of this, something similar, to talk about Agile in general. And so I read through the article then. So it is definitely biased, and it asked people questions where you would get expected answers. And I will tell you, you would expect, when you ask any software engineer especially, what do you think about Agile? I hate it. When you ask what they hate about it, probably too many meetings. But also you will often learn that Agile is a word that doesn't always mean the same things, depending on which company, what size of company, who the project manager is, who the upper management people are, what their expectations are by using Agile, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people have run into poor, negative, disappointing, frustrating project management schemes or team organization schemes that are labeled Agile, which are disappointing, such that one might say, oh, Agile is disappointing. But I would suggest that the Agile implementation, and implementation is a heavy word, but the way they adapted Agile methodologies to their team dynamics and their project goals and workflows and so on, was probably poor. Maybe it's the implementation that has a higher failure rate. Goodhart's Law. It's a Wikipedia page link for Goodhart's Law, and I have that written right here. It is when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So we'll talk about this briefly. The one of the ideas behind Agile is to figure out what you're working on, so that the whole team is aware, so that they're not being told what to do so much as being asked to participate in what we will do. Given a collection of goals, right? We're going to write a text editor. Let's decide what we want to build. And this is an interesting example if you are in the software development world. because this has been an area of interest. And there's just been a new editor, and the new editor comes along every once in a while called Zed, and it's kind of taken the world by storm, just like VS Code did many years ago, and other similar phenomena occur now and then. So if you're going to write a text editor, I'm going to guess the Zed team, not being a commercial endeavor as far as I'm aware, said, "Hey, let's figure out what we want to build based on what we need and what we know other people need that use these editors for the things that we do and the things that they do." So you embrace the outcomes during the process of discussing what you are going to build, what you're going to make, how you're going to do it. It's almost like sitting down with, say you're a caterer and you have a wedding that you're catering. It's almost like involving the bride, the groom, the family, the catering staff. You kind of all sit down and say, okay, what do we need? What do we want? What kind of a menu do you want? Does anybody have any special food needs? Do any of you have any special food needs, etc.? So you front load your development efforts with what are we doing and what do we want our outcomes to be? And this is not always, so if we start measuring things like, okay, how many, for the software editor, for the text editor example, if we say, okay, well, each week we want to accomplish a certain number of items on our design specification that was conceived by one person, you can very easily start to say, well, we only finished 7 of 10 things, so we must be declining in productivity. So we're going to need to add people, and that's one of the classic errors when you take your metrics and you make them into hiring decisions, because additional people do not equal additional productivity. So when you use the metrics to become the thing that you're concerned about, rather than how much did we get done this week? 7 out of 10 units of what we were hoping to attain for completion this week. Oh, okay, so let's aim for 7 next week. And then when next week comes along and you go, we did 8 this week. Okay, so we're kind of running at a 7 to 8 level of outcome, and there are no units on the 7 to 8. And that's one of the things that kills people. They get very frustrated about what I need lines of code or hours of meetings. No, it's just a rough measurement of what we think we're accomplishing when we do certain things. And I'm oversimplifying, but we'll get to the principles. So if you decide that the measurements are what you're trying to adjust rather than the outcomes, then you will find yourself in trouble. And so we'll kind of cover that today, but really this is more of an introduction because we're already doing this for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So I figured, this would be an interesting topic to discuss. There's a book called Clean Agile. It is written by Robert C. Martin, who is sort of prolific on the tech speaker stage on the scene. He makes many presentations. He's often seen in some video podcasts or other similar. He's written several books, and he was one of the people that was in the room and when they conceived of the Agile methodology, the Agile principles, the Agile manifesto. So he has a book, Clean Agile. I have a Goodreads link to it, not an affiliate link, so go crazy. It is a pretty good book. He begins the book by pointing out that it's his recollection. It is not a authoritative tome on the topic. It is much more of a anecdotes and here's what we seem to be thinking. So he's not necessarily speaking for the entire group of people that conceived of this, but more as a member of that group of people recounting some of the ideas that they discussed and why they made the decisions or conceived of and expressed the notions that they did. It's a pretty good book. And if you read the book, somewhere early on, you will say, so this is not supposed to be a manual on how to make your software developers do more work and to hold them accountable. It's really about the team holding itself accountable and doing the right amount of work for that team to end up with positive outcomes, not buggy software, not rushed, not untested. And of course, we're living in an era today on this July 26, 2024, where CrowdStrike did its thing. And as the news unfolds, and it will continue to unfold, I'm sure, but they're blaming the, 8.5 million computers that were taken out, that they were broken for a time. I think they're starting to recover slowly but surely. Very briefly, someone at CrowdStrike, someone's created an update. It was going to be pushed out to these computers. There are various, you're not a desktop CrowdStrike user. You're an airport, you're an airline, you are a hospital, you're a financial institution, etc. So these are big companies, of course. That makes it even more fun. So they pushed out an update, and the update was bad, and it led to, I believe, I don't know if they've found more information, but it led to a boot loop. So your computer gets its update, it reboots, and then it says, oh, something has gone awry, and it reboots again. And then it says, oh, something has gone awry, because it doesn't remember that this already happened. So it does it again. And before you know it, you're seeing the old blue screen of death. And that's it. You don't get past that. And that's bad. So probably what happened was someone on the team had to make a deadline or meet some sort of a project management requirement. So they figured, should we test this more? Nah. And I'm laughing because this happens all the time, because testing is often left to the end. It's not considered a critical path item. So we'll just put testing on the low priority path. But if we have to ship without testing, we'll do it anyway. And these are the sorts of things that'll happen. And if you ever listen to Robert C. Martin or Bob Martin or Uncle Bob, that's his, I would say nom de plume, but it's actually more his Twitter handle. And he will frequently make that self-introduction during some talks. So he has a couple of versions of a talk where he says, imagine you're driving in a car and you want to hit the brake pedal. In this modern era, there's 100% chance that there is software running on at least one computer between that brake pedal and the brakes. Now, the brakes may engage regardless, even if the power is off, the brakes have to work. But it's a simplified take on, we are dependent on this software for really critical things that could be dangerous. And if people are designing them without the notion that we should test things, and testing should be a part of our team culture, and it's the way we develop and deliver quality products, because we care about these things, and we care about them individually and as a team, and we collaborate, and we fix problems as we encounter them. We come up with better ideas, even if they weren't conceived right up front by a program manager or a marketing department. We might say, hey, this is a better way to do this. It gets better results. You should have the flexibility and freedom to make better outcomes, and that's part of the deal. So if you read through that book, you will come away with that notion, rather than, of course, it's a set of laws that must be followed with a project manager as the coach, the agile coach. And I'll very briefly go into one or two of my own experiences where this has gone south. It doesn't really work if you do it that way. If you turn agile into a benchmarking tool, it's not what it's about. Finally, the Agile for Volunteers repository for our Agile for Volunteers methodology that we're adopting for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Very much a work in progress, so you can visit that if you like. Don't worry, right there in the name, doc-agile-for-volunteers. It's a document. It will likely be a Git book and not a book like a thick book, but a Git book or read the docs. So the presentation will be a little bit nicer. So this is a repository, but you can click on links. You can just read text. So it's, but again, very much a work in progress, but you can see some of the ideas that we're starting to flesh out. And I'll get into why we're doing this in a moment. But yeah, do check out that book. I just reread it as we were putting Agile for Volunteers on the front burner at long last. But this is not about Agile for volunteers necessarily. It's Agile for all. So let's begin. Agile is not law. It is important to understand that Agile, as created back in 2001, was a set of ideas, maybe a set of ideals, maybe optimistic, that were intended to yield better outcomes in the software development space. So they can apply elsewhere, as we'll explore here. But those are the initial conditions. It was software engineers in a room in Utah, I think it was, 2001, in a room at a ski resort, Snowbird, maybe, saying to the group, how can we make what we are being paid to do better so that what we do, what we actually come out with, what we come up with, what we release to the public, when people use the things that we are making, how can we make those things better? How can we make the user experience better? And like I said, they can apply elsewhere, but these were software developers that were conceiving of this. So they came up with some reasonably useful, even intuitive notions that don't only apply to software development. Agile became a popular term and led to the emergence of layers upon layers of training and certification and titles. Are you a Scrum Master? Are you an Agile coach? Are you a trainer? Are you certifying an Agile program? Do you have a deck of cards for assigning points? Or, yeah, there's all kinds of toys and doohickeys and job titles and consultancies and so on. It's layers and layers. It's ways to make money. And it leaned more and more towards project management and progress reporting over delivery of quality outcomes. So as Goodhart Law states, again, I'll repeat it, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So if one of the best, the one that people never think about, if you're CEO of a company, and this happens every once in a while, not so much lately, but back in the .com era, especially, CEO takes $1 salary will only be compensated in stock. So the measurement of the company is often the value of its stock price in a public company. The CEO is being paid $1. So the CEO wants that stock price to go up for the sake of personal compensation. So the measure of the value of the company, the market assessment of its value, may be the market cap, the capitalization level based on its outstanding shares and their valuation in the public marketplace on your stock exchange. So if the CEO makes decisions to adjust the valuation of the company and thus the stock price, or vice versa, really. Hey, I laid off a bunch of people, so our profitability goes up. Ooh, that makes the stock price go up. It's not necessarily healthy for the long term, but the target is to make that stock price go up so the CEO, when they're in their trading window, can sell some shares and pay that expensive midlife Ferrari payment or whatever their because often people can't live on $1. It's a little thin. So the measurement of the company's value or health, if it is stock price for a publicly traded company, if that becomes the target of compensation by a CEO or maybe an executive staff or people that are running the company making these decisions, if they benefit from changing that metric for their own benefit, then it's no longer a good measure. So this can apply in many ways. Think about it. Think about your own surroundings. When is it that a measurement becomes a target? A common and reasonable response to this is Agile as conceived was not laying down the law. And by the way, a response to this on the part or from people like Bob Martin or people who are able to describe positive Agile experiences or well-implemented Agile methodologies. So Agile as conceived was not laying down the law. It was a collection of ideas, or as it says right in the document, principles, conceived to enable software developers originally to deliver quality in a collaborative way. Principles, not laws. So We have an organization made up entirely of volunteers, 100%. There are no compensated individuals. There are no bosses. There's no management hierarchy. Strictly speaking, like you can't be fired by your manager. You can just not show up, or you can refuse to be collaborative, and I'll describe why that is important. So our organization is completely volunteer based and is not focused only on software. So we get to try out our adaptation of Agile for volunteers, and our implementation of that on two axes. So one, not professional employees of a company. They are strictly volunteers, and they are not developing only software. They're developing, initiatives and projects, and some of that may be software, some of it may be other things. Volunteers are not spending 40 hours each week focused on project progress. They're not paid. They're not expected to come in to participate in stand-up meetings, which is common in especially the really misguided Agile implementations. They're not expected to appear at meetings in person, which is something that Agile principles suggest but don't require. And so on. So oftentimes these principles will be turned into requirements. They'll be turned into rote. Yes, of course, we're having a stand-up every morning. And by the way, a stand-up is supposed to be very brief. It should be something like 15 minutes-ish, depending on the size of the team. But the size of the team should not be huge. If the size of your team is such that you need to have a 1 hour plus meeting every day, every morning, it's time to factor that team into smaller groups that can move more quickly together, and then every once in a while share information across those teams, possibly through a project manager who's writing down story points as a metric, unfortunately. Volunteers are not doing those things. They are contributing their time, effort, and expertise, and so you cannot count on schedule around a professional paid commitment. This is all coming from within. While Agile was conceived for software developers and the software development process, we can apply similar principles to other creative work and creative development. And the interaction and integration of software and non-software elements of a particular project can fit in there as well. So you can do a software project. You can do all of the things that are not software about the project, like graphic elements, icons, audio, video, documentation, testing, marketing. Those things are not software. Those things are equally important. So they all have to come together at some point. So if there's a whole team approach, if the teams can be factored into small groups that can move quickly, but they still communicate, that's okay. That's a good thing. Not everything is a software, though. And that's been an underlying principle of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation in general, which I am the managing director, if I didn't mention that recently. We started off as the Code for Vegas Foundation, which was a reboot of the Code for Vegas. It wasn't quite a brigade back then, but basically a minion group or cohort from Code for America. So Code for Vegas, technically part of Code for America in its early days, like over a decade ago. We rebooted it, and then we started hearing, "Oh, I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer. This isn't really for me then." And like, no. Innovation is not only software. So that's important to keep in mind. And that's why we're not constraining ourselves to only trying this out with software. So the key components, though, and this is where I'm going to flip through the Agile Manifesto. So right on the front page, if you visit the website, it lays out the goals. It's comparing some notions on the left with counter notions on the right per sentence. So I'm going to read through those really quickly. And for once, I have the page already up and ready to go. So I saw the whole first page is half of it is links to translations of the manifesto. There are links to about the authors and so forth. But the entire first page of the manifesto I will read to you now, and I won't read the people's names. That's like a third of the text, and it's 17 people. The Manifesto for Agile Software Development. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We'll get to the final statement on this, but not that the things on the right or the second half of the sentence is not important. They're just not as important. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is contracts with any people that your group is working for. So if you're at a big company, your customer may be people inside your company. So that the definition and use of the term customer is important. It's not always a retail customer purchasing a product from you. It's the people you are building your stuff for, or you're making your thing for, the people for whom you are pursuing this endeavor. So customer collaboration, involve them in the process. Co-creation is a good term. Responding to change over following a plan. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Hang on. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, so they're not thrown out, they're just weighed against the value of the items on the left. So if we start with individuals' interactions over process and tools, the rules are not intended to be the law. The processes and the tools are starting points. Individuals and interactions are where you start to say, does a morning meeting every single day make sense for our team? Or are we working better without that daily stand-up meeting? Maybe we do the stand-up meeting once a week, or maybe we can do it completely virtually. Sorry, I had to sneeze there. That was had to hit the pause button real quick. So you don't have to follow this notion of like, we must have meetings every day. Processes and tools should be used to improve interactions and individual progress, productivity, satisfaction. There's something really positive happens when you can complete things in a way that makes you feel like you really accomplished something. So processes and tools are important, but individual contributors and the interactions between them are better, more important, and the processes and tools should be tailored or tuned or adjusted or selected to encourage individual job satisfaction, progress, etc., and the interactions between people in your team and people not in your team. Working software, you can replace software with whatever it is you're making. So if you are making a new recipe for a restaurant, if you're making a new bookstore, a new retail business, if you're making a new anything, doesn't have to be software. Over comprehensive documentation. So this is where occasionally you'll run into this, where you create a business plan or a pitch deck, and you spell out everything, and then you get a third of the way in, you're like, this is not going according to this documentation that I laid out. And if you're not willing to focus more on the outcome, if you're like, no, we must follow the plan, we must follow what we have written down, you may not end up with working software or a better recipe or a functioning, viable bookstore or whatever it is you're doing. So sticking to the plan sometimes is not a good idea. Looking at the outcomes or the progress toward that outcome is agile thinking, right? Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. That is, rather than stating up front, this is what we're going to do for you, and then maybe being late or maybe not meeting expectations or needing to change some things, or things are not available or possible. The customer could be collaborating the whole way, and they could be a part of the process, so that as new realizations are encountered, as improvements become possible, as productivity is higher or lower than expected, the customer is involved. And again, the customer could be the traditional notion of a customer, a person that walks up to a cash register or otherwise conducts like one-on-one business, or somebody buying tangible things, but it could also be people that will be using your software or your hardware or your product, your service. It could be people inside your company. It could be other teams. It could be people you know. It could be people you've never met on the other side of the planet. So contract negotiation usually sets up, I'll say adversarial relationship. It's not always, but the notion is we're going to agree to this, and then you have to be concerned if you don't meet those agreed upon expectations. But if you're collaborating the whole way, it's a little bit easier to tune things. And usually, if things go well, you can tune things in a positive direction. Oh, we got more value than we were expecting, or things went better than we thought, or the deviation from the original timeline or planned schedule is acceptable because we know what's happening and we know what's going on. So collaborate. And responding to change, over following a plan, that means rather than sticking to the comprehensive documentation or preconceived notions or having to worry about a contract that's been agreed to or falling in love with, we have to use story points and we have to maximize story points per, or as happened in one of my workplaces, the project manager would stare at Jira graphs all day, like literally looking at bugs open, bugs closed, issue reports, and all these different pie charts and burn down charts and all this other silliness. She would never talk to the people doing the work, just looking at the charts. So rather than being overly concerned with these things, you should be concerned about how you respond to change. Like, oh, things are not going quite the way we thought they should be this week. What should we do next week to get back on track or to figure out where those tracks need to move? So, don't get overly stuck on the traditional focal points. Consider the team, consider the people, consider for whom you are doing whatever it is you're doing, the customer, whatever that customer is, however that takes shape, and be ready to change and be ready to listen to your team. So, and then there's the 17 contributors. If you read Clean Agile, he tells the story of why it's not 18 and also why it's all dudes. And it was a sign of the times, and things have changed since then, which is good. But yeah, a bunch of dudes, one missing. I suspect if this meeting were held today, it would be a very different group of people. I would wonder if a similar outcome would emerge. So now let's go very quickly. These are not much longer. The 12 principles of Agile. And remember, these were conceived for software development. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily limited to software development. So let's read through these really quickly, and I won't read them twice this time. Principles behind the Agile Manifesto. We value or follow these principles. Maybe it should be value, but we follow these principles. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So replace software with whatever it is you're doing, and while some things don't need to be released frequently to the public, you don't need to upgrade or update or make changes, improvements to on a daily basis, but it is interesting to be aware that you can make your customers happy. You can make them want to do business with you. You can make them want to come back and do more business with you and tell their friends to do business with you. And whatever that business is can take many forms. When you pay attention to customers, because you may release something that you like. And this is, there are famous stories about chefs in restaurants. And if you ask for salt and pepper, they kick you out. There's no need. If you want to tick a chef off, you put salt and pepper on your dish before you taste it. Oh, that's no good. So be aware and cognizant of your customer needs, your customer satisfaction, what you're building. Does it work for them? Listen to what they have to say, react. Welcome changing requirements. That means if things change, don't be rigid and don't feel that, nope, we have a plan, we got to stick to it. Even late in development, Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So that means if things change, and it will be a net positive for what you're building and the people that will be using it, paying you, don't throw it out the window. In the software world, there will sometimes be the point release notion, like, we won't make it for the original timeline, but we'll put that in a point release that will come out soon after. That's sometimes works, sometimes it does not. Deliver working software, but could be anything. Whenever I say software, think of it as whatever it is you're doing. Frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale. So this means if you think about what you're building or making or selling or producing or providing, if there's room for it to get better, or if there's room for it to better match the needs or requirements of your customers, if there's a possibility of addressing the needs of new customers, then sure, being attentive and responsive in a timely manner and coming up with updates and upgrades and whatnot makes total sense. It doesn't always make sense depending on what it is you're making. You can't upgrade a car every couple of weeks, although software updates can come every couple of weeks, if that's good or bad. It depends completely on what you're making, but the bottom line here, the core of this principle is to be ready, willing, and I'll say able, but really think of it as being structured or being sort of organized to be responsive in a timely way. And this benefits not only your current customers, but may attract new customers. And that's happy customers should be one of the goals. If that is your the nature of your business, right, is having customers, then keeping them happy is part of the deal. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. This comes down to just communication, and it doesn't have to be software developers. It could be anybody across, we'll say, disciplines. So your software people, your marketing people, your testing people, your language translation, your user experience design, your user interface developers, the people that are doing the visual or the elements, the accessibility elements perhaps of the user experience and the user interface. These are all people that are not necessarily technical. They're not necessarily software people. I'm rereading Kitchen Confidential from Anthony Bourdain. It's a good book, by the way. And his stories are about interactions between himself as a chef, or himself as not yet a chef, or himself in a competitive situation with another chef, with a sous chef, with line cooks, with dishwashers, with owners, with vendors, the purveyors, with various other characters. So it's an interesting read, and if you take it in this context, he needed to communicate with a variety of people on a daily basis just to make sure that the things were not falling apart. So this notion applies across many areas, many different notions, and different people doing different jobs and different roles with different disciplines and skill sets and backgrounds. Build projects around motivated individuals. That means have a team of people that want to be there. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So don't tell people what to do. Don't require daily meetings if they're not useful. Don't tell people how to do their job. You hire smart people so that they will figure that out. And it doesn't have to be software development again. It could be anything. If you hire good people, or if you bring good people into a project, contractors, consultants, external people, volunteers, if they want to be there, if they're motivated, and you say, okay, well, we're not going to, and for volunteers, we can't really force you. We can't require you. It's not compulsory because we're not paying you. So it's out of the goodness of your heart that you're contributing your time, effort, expertise for the good of this project and this initiative. So whatever parts of the projects you want to contribute to. And remember also, you're working with other people. So build projects around motivated individuals. That's plural. So hopefully other people are motivated. And when you bring someone in who isn't, that can take away some of that motivation from others. So balance a team of motivated people, regardless of what their background and skill set is and what they're focused on, because you have a whole team approach to keep in mind. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Now remember, this was written in 2001. Humans being social creatures, this is not untrue, but it is also not always practical or possible. As I mentioned, volunteers cannot be expected or required to show up for a meeting every day. They can't be expected to show up in person somewhere. There's probably not an office, although we do have a meeting space where they could come. But you can't expect that. And in fact, today, the post-pandemic era, work from home, working remotely, it's not always practical, possible, reasonable, or even necessary to have people meet on a regular basis in person, especially as the team size grows. And here again, if a group of people are able to make a good working relationship productive and fulfilling, right? Being happy about what you're doing, not feeling like, oh, this is not working. If you can make that work and you never have to see each other or be in the same room, there's nothing wrong with that. Working software is the primary measure of progress. Now, once again, not always software, so replace that with the way you would describe what you're working on. Does the thing work? Now, in some cases, you won't know that for some amount of time, so you get trapped in the like, well, we have to measure in software. You have to measure lines of code, or are they attending the meeting? Why aren't you at the meeting? Because you mistake these unfortunate metrics for progress. But if your team is all aligned and you are all expecting similar things, one of the goals would be, let's try to make things so that we can try them out every day. When I was building my food truck thing, my platform for scheduling and discovering food trucks in the Bay Area many years ago, I would work on some code in a coffee shop, and then I would go to a food truck event in the evening, and I would show a quick demo. I would have whatever I was building a web-based thing, so you could try it out on my phone and show people, oh, wow, that's cool. Okay. So almost every day I was able to show some other feature or facet of a feature or a change, and I would get some feedback, and I would next day try out the old version and the new version and show it to some more different people. So I'm interacting with my customers, which were food truck owners, and asking for their feedback on what I was working on. And it was actually working on a regular basis such that I could show it to them. So it's pretty cool. So if that's your measure of progress, I'm not showing them and saying, I wrote 40 lines of code today to make this work. No. To them, it's like, oh, that looks cool. That looks even better than the last time I saw it. So the primary measure of progress is that the thing that you're trying to deliver at the end is actually visually or visibly or in some way experientially getting closer to that. Oh, that's even better than the last time I saw it. So it doesn't matter how many lines of code or how many hours of meetings or how many hours of sleep you didn't get, etc. How many bugs were open and closed? That's not the measure. Agile, and by the way, I have an Apple story that I will share if I remember. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. This is the story point feedback scheme. So rather than using story points to judge people for not being productive, you use story points or some equivalent to say, here's the pace that we can maintain so that we end up with positive outcomes that work. We're not staying up all night. We're not rushing. We're not introducing new bugs. We're not pushing out an update to the world that takes out 8.5 million computers. Whoopsie, right? So if you promote sustainable development of whatever it is, if you don't work crazy, but if you work smart, as they say, and you involve people with communication and set goals that are appropriate, and you understand when you need to readjust goals, here's why, here's where we're slowing down or we're speeding up, et cetera, then you won't find yourself having to pull all-nighters or work all weekend or pull 90-hour weeks. Ideally, I mean, sometimes it happens, but question why it happened. Question the value of the outcome of those, double hours and how that impacts the team. Where are we? Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. That means technical excellence can apply to anything, so just say excellence, and good design, so thinking things through. If you read Kitchen Confidential, which I suggest you do, I recommend it, there is a section where Anthony Bourdain is speaking of one of his bosses, I guess, one of his employers, Bigfoot, and I think over the years that the determination who that actually is has been made, so I'll leave that to you to discover for yourself. Bigfoot, he says, Bigfoot, you can always see a Bigfoot operation. He always has little pulls on the power plugs that are maybe near water so that nobody gets injured if they have to plug or unplug something, so it keeps their hand away from the socket directly. Different drains and hot water faucets for melting ice behind the bar. And he just goes on and on about different features and thoughtful considerations that are visible and always visible whenever there's a Bigfoot operation at hand, right? So he's essentially saying processes are in place to ensure not technical excellence necessarily, but excellence, right? We've designed the workplace and workflows so that we can deliver food. You can spend time on the food and the drink, not on, I don't want to die by plugging or unplugging this plug near this water, or I don't want to spend an hour trying to melt ice. Oh, look, it's already accounted for. So if you think things through, and I will add to this, if you listen to your team or you collaborate on your processes, you will turn, and this is the continuous attention. So I'll be explicit that you actually say, oh, you know what would work better? And everybody else might say, yeah, that is a good idea, right? It's not about following the rules. It's about making the rules work. Maybe the rules follow you. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. This one is hard for people to realize sometimes. Hey, what if we implement 25 features that nobody needs? How about if we implement the 3 that we know people need, and we put off the discussion or the decisions about those other features until we figure out if we really need them? But if we think about it now, but we don't actually do it, but we're ready just in case it does, because then maybe 2 more features will be essential, right? So overthinking is not always good. So simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. And again, deferment of decisions in, I believe it's clean architecture. Uncle Bob recounts a tale of writing some wiki software, not quite Wikipedia, but some like a personal wiki tool. And he said, we didn't assume it was going to be a database. We just started with, we'll just use file system. And they never changed because it was like, it works. We don't have to design an entire schema and query system around some maybe MySQL or maybe some other database. We'll just build a thing that already works. We started with file system and it totally works. Why do we want to break that? So they kept it simple by deferring the decision about a database to the point where it was not necessary. You can do that in a lot of ways. Don't overthink things. Don't do work that's not essential, because simplicity is essential. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organized teams. This is something that is difficult to describe to managers who have grown up with the notion that they must be in control. They're responsible for outcomes. They will have to answer to their boss or their manager, or they'll have to manage up if something is not going according to plan. But maybe the self-organizing team will say, hey, it will make more sense if we do this other part first, and we'll move the other requirements to later. We'll defer them to later. We may not even have to do them. So that may take a weird hit on the project. Like, oh, we didn't finish the things that we were supposed to finish this week. Yeah, we move them to next week. If your team is able, the people that are, and the team could be software developers, could be chefs, could be line cooks, could be bookstore employees, whatever you're doing, the people that are doing the work sometimes have a better handle on what's working and what isn't than the manager, the project manager, the person trying to direct, the foreman, etc. So listen to the people that are actually on the ground doing the things. They may give you the correct answers and adjust accordingly. Then you got to manage up. Then you got to deal with a manager who had the same preconceived notions that you may have. And again, this is all sounding like not quite startup mode, but I'm just running through these kind of casually wandering around how we've been tackling some of these. But so you should read this yourself and apply it to what you're doing. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams, though. That's one of the things that I think is the most difficult, especially for entrepreneurs or people with startups, is that, no, I have the idea and this is what's getting funding. But again, and I think it was Steve Jobs who said this, why would we hire smart people and tell them what to do? We hire smart people so they tell us what to do. Or you could balance that by saying they tell us what they're going to do. Hire smart people, or bring on people that are self-motivated, but they're also interested, they're interesting, they're communicative, and they understand that their inputs have value. So say, hey, if you see a problem, say so. If there's a way that you can do something better, or if you and other people that you work with can do something better, don't feel like you need my approval, right? If you can accomplish it and try it out and hey, it works. Don't feel like you must ask permission. Ask forgiveness. And at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. And this is the part that I believe is left out entirely whenever you hear someone say, Agile's horrible, Agile sucks, it's the worst, killed my project. You have studies that suggest 268% worse, whatever that really means. And you can search around. If you find that article, you'll find responses to it. And that's one of the things, like what is 268% of what? What does that mean? What is worse, better? And then the number of people they spoke to, and Agile has become again a word with many meanings. And so when you say Agile and I say Agile, we may have different notions. And in fact, we almost certainly do. I worked at Apple. Pardon me. I worked at Apple in the Apple Quality Group, and I've talked about this previously. And there was a central database. They called it, what do they call it? Aardvark. It was what was it? I can't remember. I know somebody who worked on the database team. It was a database. It was hosted in the North Bay somewhere, and it was a giant database application with a really dodgy user interface. You could access it with this was pre-web days. Like, I'm not kidding. When I was working at Apple at this time, hey, try out this weird thing, the Mosaic web browser. And there was like 3 websites. So it wasn't a web-based tool, but it was a really, really horrible user interface. And so you could, and project managers did, query for bugs, issues filed against a project. And you could show how many bugs were opened and how many were closed. And remember earlier I said there was this project manager at a different company that would just spend her time looking all day at the charts, the pie charts and the line chart, all this. That's all that mattered. Don't talk to people, just look at the numbers. So opens versus closes. And one day they announced, we have reached some sort of equilibrium. So the same number of bugs are being opened and closed. And sometime during that day, the loudness of the counter argument, which was, that is not possible. That is not how this works. Like, what are you even talking about? No, look right here. The line is flat. It's staying at 10,000. So there's the same number of bugs opening and closing. So we're staying steady at 10,000. And of course, hopefully you're thinking this right now. Can I check out that database query? Or even simpler than that, is there a paging option that you are missing? And indeed, the default report length for this database, I wish I could remember, but it doesn't really matter. But it was not Postgres or MySQL. It was a bigger, kind of like an Oracle class, expensive database with a team of people running this show there in a different city in the North Bay, and we were down in Cupertino. But it was used globally, all Apple worldwide. And yeah, it would give you the first 10,000 results until you told it to say, give me the next 10,000. And so by the next morning, there was a follow-up announcement that, never mind, there were plenty more bugs. So if you are really concerned with bug opening and closing, but you don't think about those metrics, if it was like, it's very important that we reach this parity level, parity, not parody. We're opening and closing at the same time. Yay, celebration. But you're not examining what those numbers are telling you, then you've gone awry. And they were penalized a little bit in the court of public opinion. Everybody kind of laughed, but such is life. Back to work. So the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles may not translate if you're not doing software development. They may not translate directly. But if there is any group of people more inclined to integrate new ideas that function better within a given scenario to meet a set of requirements or goals, I can't think of one than software engineers. In fact, a nuanced read of the Agile Manifesto implies that it favors self-adaptation, and that's that last principle, which I will read again in context. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So Agile, much like the elastic clause in our Constitution, is saying, make changes to this if you need to. So yeah, software engineers don't design something that's immutable, not in this case. So what that means is when you hear people tell you how awful Agile is, you should ask them what their experience has been. And I will say mostly the times that I've been in totally fake Agile projects have been the worst. So you end up with, I was working as a consultant in a company that is all consultants, right? Not all, but mostly external consulting, all remote first work and so on. We got to have a meeting every morning. So stand-up meeting, virtual Zoom call every morning. They would go on for like an hour, hour and a half. The specification for the project was already written ahead of time. It went on for pages and pages, like 12, 20, who knows. Everything was spelled out in great detail ahead of time. So when you do that much forethought and planning to that level of detail ahead of time, you're going to encounter things that need to change. And so along the way, you would see that, oh, okay, well, that's not really going to work. Maybe we should change that. And there was the notion of story points. So they had these specifications, and it wasn't really user stories, but it was like, here's a thing we need to accomplish. So they were really focused on the tasks, not the user stories, because the specification was already done. There was no need for user stories. And I'll get into what that means very briefly. This is a topic for another day when I bring over the full Agile for Volunteers implementation once we've had some time to try it out. But essentially it was, okay, we need to figure out what we're doing for the next quote unquote sprint. And a sprint is where you try to gather up a collection of things that each person is going to try to accomplish, and then you work on it for 2 weeks. Oh, but you still have daily meetings and you still have other, distractions. So the assignment of story points, you try to decide how, and in this case, tasks, how much work a task would take. And so who's going to take 8 points and 10 points and whatever. So everybody takes their points, and then the points are used to judge your personal productivity, but there's never an adjustment. So over several weeks, it's very clear that the only thing that's happening here is that we're measuring who is performing best at implementing the specification that is already broken, because we've already had to discuss changes to it. And there were very clearly pieces missing from it, but the purpose of their attempt at some sort of agile style, they were doing more Scrum, but it didn't involve listening to people about the process. It was only about the project, and it was run completely and totally in a hierarchical fashion by the project manager, who had either written directly or had been a substantial contributor to the specification. So there's motivation to implement the spec as written. Like, this is my project, I have specified it. So that was a really unhealthy, not productive engagement. The workflow, the process, the interactions all could have benefited from proactive discussion and engagement about making it better. So how does this apply to you? So your startup endeavor, whatever it is, you may be building a software startup or maybe a non-software startup. And I use the term startup more flexibly. A lot of people figure, oh, if you're going for venture capital funding and you're building a software or hardware, computer tech focused, or maybe something in biotech, but it's got to be tech. But I think anyone who's ever started their own business or their own company of any kind, you may feel like, well, that seems like very similar amounts of stress and frustration and difficulty and so on. And I cannot remember the name of this person, but he was on the Lex Friedman show. I'm not a huge giant fan, but it's an economist, and he was discussing some things, and he paraphrased a famous author, economist, I believe it was a German economist, and he paraphrased it as this: an entrepreneur is someone with great ideas and no money. And one of these days I'll track down who. I think the original quote was a little less humorous, but it was essentially capital and contribution to an economy or whatever. But yeah, anyone who's ever built a startup or changed the world starts with nothing. So your entrepreneurial endeavor may be a retail establishment or a food truck or a restaurant or a bar or a consulting service or anything. Could be anything. Could be a one-person company and you hire consultants and contractors. Who knows? But when you involve people in a process, if you empower them, especially if they're employees, that's a little bit easier. A whole team and setting a pace that adjusts to the team, not to mention enabling your team to share their insights for potentially improved outcomes, are all ways to apply Agile principles regardless of your software development or not leanings. So whether you're developing software or not, and if you look at a restaurant, for example, restaurants are always chaotic. There's always chaos. My family owned a restaurant when I was 10, absolute chaos. And I worked in our restaurant when I was 10, and I've worked in other restaurants in my younger years. Absolute chaos. It's amazing that they function at all. And they often fail. But fun fact, the failure rate of restaurants is approximately the same as the failure rate of startups in general. So they're not extra troubled. So what if you listen to your line cooks and your bussers and your bartenders and your wait staff and your any service industry folks, any of the culinary artistes, anybody that's involved in the process should be able to chime in with a way to make things better. And you should listen to them because they're doing it every day, and you may not have any idea what they're talking about, and you should. So Agile principles and the whole team approach. It's a little bit trickier if you are outsourcing to a contract agency or individuals or individual consultants. But it depends. If you are building a house or if you're in construction in general, you are always working with subcontractors. You're always working with vendors and suppliers. If they know things and they can be helpful to you for your particular project, you should listen to them. You should make it clear that you want to know. That's what you're paying them for. You are not paying them to listen to you so much as you're paying them to do the job that needs to be done. And sure, you've told them the general idea, like the outlet should go here. And if they say, well, the outlet should be better, really, it'd be safer if it was over here. Okay, let's figure this out. Let's discuss. Why not? But if you dictators don't get very far. You got to be careful with that. Agile principles are starting points. So if you read through the manifesto for yourself and the principles, in which I suggest you do, you can start there, but don't end there. I always say that about Wikipedia, same thing. Like, take from this simple list of 12 things and the notions that are on the homepage, start there. And ultimately, they should be a basis for constructing a working, maybe even optimal methodology to focus on advancing your cause, not measuring beans. Although cost, payroll, overhead, these don't go away. Agile doesn't do magic. But be sure and account for things that may lead to burning through that money or that pile of beans faster. So a more cohesive team, a productive interaction and exchange of ideas throughout, empowering people to participate in improvement and tuning and adjustment may just pay off. So our ongoing pursuits, this is an ongoing effort, Agile for Volunteers, that has recently stepped up. It used to be a one-page idea that was sort of a discussion point. It has now become its own separate documentation project to spell out the ideas, and as with Agile and as with this, can be tuned and adjusted and discussed and will be based on actual interaction and use. So we'll hopefully learn more. So as we're focusing more on it, we will hopefully learn more from it. More detailed descriptions and some design and progress management tools in the form of issue forms and submission templates to help remove those steps from the collection of distractions that would be faced. So if you want to work on an Agile for Volunteers project for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, or maybe others that adopt this, a working set of tools that help to maximize your time, your volunteer time that you're contributing, your time, effort, and expertise. Don't think of them as rules, but think of them as time-saving and sort of a canonical structure to aid in communication, because volunteers are not spending full work days on a project. So in this case, a volunteer basis means not spending time deciding, what am I going to write when I describe this feature that we could implement? A feature is something that should be describable by anyone on the team. If you're a graphic artist and you want to have a feature that does a certain thing, you shouldn't have to be a coder to describe that. Maybe a coder has to implement it. Maybe a graphic artist has to implement something. Maybe a QA tester, maybe a marketing person, maybe a language translator. Again, all these different roles. The definition of an initiative or a component project should not require pure software development skill. Sometimes that's the opposite of what you need. So to empower people with a starting point for some structured communication in an asynchronous fashion should work, and we'll find out. So when I say templates and tools, these are not like edicts handed down, more like here are some things as a starting point, so we don't have to spend time thinking about the information we need to collect. We can spend time on the discussion of the information we have collected and go from there. So we can describe what we're trying to accomplish and come up with specifics that we want to actually work on. And we can start with a 2-week iteration, and we can see what that gets us and if that works for everybody who's involved. So very adjustable, very tunable, not by any means software only. In keeping with the Agile notions we covered, these are not hard specifications, like I said, so more a collection of principle adaptations with some ubiquitous language, which is important. So we'll use similar terminology, just like the templates and the forms and so on. You use words, language, and you use some forms and some standard approaches to things, so you don't have to be concerned with what does that word mean, how are we using that term, what information should I capture when I describe a new feature or a new user story. What is a user story? So we can establish some basic fundamental ground rules, if you will, not laws, but here's how things will work to enhance communication and hopefully productivity, and make the most of volunteer time, effort, and expertise, because your volunteer time should not be spent inventing things that we can invent beforehand. So that's the notion there. One of the most important aspects of our implementation of Agile for Volunteers is that all parties are uncompensated volunteers. They're all contributing that time, effort, and expertise out of the goodness of their heart, or maybe for a long tail, like, what comes of it. But there's no paychecks or anything. The workflow tools, for example, as I've already said, are minimal, but they're there to make the most of that time, effort, and expertise so that you're not trying to get stuff done. You can actually focus on getting stuff done. But we can always tune and adjust everything along the way. So we have starting points that we can tune and adjust rather than starting from scratch. So the volunteer time is not spent on starting Agile for Volunteers. That's an idea that has already been fleshed out for its initial rollout. But it's always subject to change, always subject to tuning and optimization based on real usage from the people using it. And you can apply that to some or all aspects of your startup adventures by listening to the people you're working with or who are working for you, because they probably start knowing things that you don't day to day, closer to the thing that they're working on, etc. If you from the start enable your whole team to participate proactively in process tuning and output quality elevation and so on, I think everybody wins. And so it's something to think about for what you're doing. It's something we'll talk more about into the future, and it's something we'll talk more about specifically as Agile for Volunteers becomes the approach that we take across all of our initiatives, and which we will invite others to try out in other places. That's all I got for you today on this Friday, the 26th of July, 2024. Thanks for listening. As always, I'm the managing director, Dan Hugo, of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, which is a Nevada nonprofit corporation and a 501c3 public charity. We are donation powered. We could be sponsor powered, but we do accept donations. If you visit our website, the homepage is linked at the top in the link section. It's Innovate for Vegas. I'm sorry. I'm doing the end of the Let's Innovate for Vegas show. I've talked about Innovate for Vegas so much. The Innovate for Vegas organization that is the starting point and the basis for our trying this out is a sponsorable organization. I don't normally plug them in my other shows. Them, us, we're all the same. But I do want to mention that if you do check out Agile for Volunteers and you find it interesting, or if you're even interested in participating in any of our projects, which will become more clearly described as the Agile for Volunteers methodology is moved into all of our initiatives, perhaps you will consider participating or sponsoring or donating to the cause or telling a friend and so on. And as far as the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program, which is all about the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem in the greater Vegas area and beyond, consider being a guest or consider telling a friend about this delightful collection of programs, or do both. And on that note, it is Friday. I'm very clearly in need of some water and a break. Which audio program is this after all? Anyway, thanks for listening so much. And thank you so much for listening. And we'll catch you later.